Gardening is like public transportation. You hold a certain amount of hope that things will go well, but you also have a reasonable amount of expectations for things to go wrong. This is the Urban Sentinel, and let's get into it. I did a previous video on my survival garden, the things that I've been planting in it and what I hope to accomplish during this growing season, and I still, fingers crossed, feel that this is going to be a better year. So I'm going to walk you through, do an update on some of the things that have been going on, the successes and the failures that I've had, and what I plan on doing about it to correct certain situations. Now, one thing I did not feature in the previous video, my apple tree. I should say trees, but I did cut one down. It had gotten diseased and weak and wasn't doing so well. This is one of, I believe I've counted 8 apples starting to grow, which honestly is the most that this tree has produced in the last 5 years. Usually the apple tree on average produces 3 to 4 good quality apples. Sometimes we get almost 6, but they're on the lower branches, and literally like the expression low-hanging fruit, the woodchucks and the other animals tend to grab for those and pull those down before we have a chance to get to them. My flower bed, which is a mix of wildflowers and certain perennials and some other annuals, I will tell you this: I don't remember what I planted, so everything that's in there is going to be a complete surprise to me. Simply put, I put the flowers in there, put them in the flower bed so it looks nice once they start growing and blooming, but I'm not tracking them. I didn't mark anything down. What grows is what grows, and with the exception of a few errant grass blades that I have to pull up, everything else I'm just going to leave in as it is until I can see it fully develop over the summer. Might be a little hard to register, but we're hovering at right about 82, 83 degrees presently this afternoon. Now, the compost bin, pretty much it's my easiest effort, lowest maintenance setup that I have, and effectively it does its job. I have to give it a little turning, get down in there, get up some of the better quality soil towards the middle, but otherwise it's moving along, doing exactly what it's supposed to do, feeding the machine. Now, as far as a lot of the herbs that I planted in various locations, most of them got picked at by the chipmunks and by the birds, and some of them have managed to make a comeback and survive the purge as it is. Others didn't do so well, and I've got some tall grass slipping in underneath the fence that I have to attend to. Now, overall, I'm not as concerned with the herbs. I still have plenty of seed left. In fact, my plan is basically those areas that you saw, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit more seeds, sprinkle some in, put some more soil back on top, keep it watered, and what grows up through that will hopefully then continue to grow. I do plan on putting a smaller wire gauge fencing around the garden, which I purchased. Now it's just a matter of securing it and making sure that the small critters don't get in. Now, woodchucks have been the primary problem that I had with my garden, both this one and the older one that was in the middle of the yard. I still have the woodchucks. In fact, I'm announcing the birth of 5 baby woodchucks that are underneath the greenhouse here. So that brings effectively my guess, the total number of woodchucks on my property, to 9 to date. And there's at least 4 active separate burrows that they individually go to and come out of. I know that there are 2 burrow holes, the one under the greenhouse and one on the front slope, that are actually connected, and they pass back and forth between those 2. Now, some of the deterrents that I use to mitigate both the woodchucks, the chipmunks, and the squirrels, and some of the birds is this simple reflective foil tape. I've got it strung up on a couple of poles and posts around the garden. This is one. Got another one there. That one blowing in the breeze, looking nice. I still have my pinwheels over there, one in that corner, and this one here as well, and one more streamer up here. So between those streamers, more or less providing a visual deterrence with a tiny bit of auditory and general distraction, as well as what's in here, which this is almost empty, but in this plastic bottle I've got 4 holes in the side, and I had it filled with fox urine as a scent deterrent. I more or less placed it within here. I did do a few drops around different parts of the garden to help deter those animals. Now, potatoes. basket. I've got two. This one is looking pretty good. That one just started coming up about 2 weeks ago. I need to add some more lawn debris and fill up to pretty much right at the top of the line up in here for this area. The second potato basket, I've got 3 shoots coming up. Same deal, I have to fill up to this area, give it the next layer, because each layer as you fill up, it helps it to begin to start sprouting off new spuds underneath that layer. Now this Greek oregano and this Thai basil, they were store-bought. The cauliflower that was in here was store-bought, but the woodchucks got at it, so these tiny little stringy things are actually from my cauliflower seeds that I replanted. Same as the dill that's over here. They tore that dill up, and this is the new stuff that's growing. Now, the primary first defense that I had to do was I had to cage off my squash because they got a hold of one entire squash head leaf and started tearing through that, and then went after the second one. So I'm actually using a small green wire rabbit fencing and then this bird netting around it. That was to effectively keep them from getting up and getting immediate access to it, because they were pulling at the leaves and then chewing it from there, pulling it towards both the fence on that side and the smaller ones that got in, climbing up, and you can even see some of their little scratch marks from their claws trying to get up inside here. I did the same thing here. Now at a certain point, the squash is going to get a lot bigger and it's going to need more room, but hopefully by then I'll put the fencing up so they can't come and pass through the wire, and I'll have a few more deterrents and probably reinforce this with a slightly better, more rigid setup to allow the vines of the squash for these to start actually climbing vertically, so that way they don't take up as much space. The beans that I had in here with the beets as well as the carrots over here, I didn't have enough hard debris. I had some twigs and branches broken up in the bottom, but not a deep enough layer. So gradually, as the leaves that were on top and the soil started to decompose, that weighted soil started to press down. So I lost about 4 inches from where it originally was, pushing down. So presently right now I'm going to leave it be, but most likely I'm going to get another bag of soil and fill it up about 4.5–5 inches in the 2 of them, and what's in here is going to stay in here, and I will just seed on top of it. In many cases I just basically flip a coin. Some things I totally scrap altogether and I start it all over again, so I might be behind a 2-week, 3-week period. Other things, if it looks like it can be salvaged, I do my best to do that, to keep it going long enough to see how it turns out. In fact, I've got cucumbers that I'll show you, and you'll understand what I mean. So these 3 pots, cucumbers, all 3 all planted at the same time. As you can see, this one's starting to come up looking pretty good. This one here is looking kind of Charlie Brown Christmas tree sad. And this one here also looking good. So I'm giving that one that looked a little pathetic a little bit more time just to see how it does, but if not, it's not a big deal for me to put more cucumber seeds in, loosen up the soil, plant that, and then see how that goes. And that'll just be behind the scheduled clock for it to grow, which hopefully won't be too difficult once the weather starts getting a lot warmer consistently. Right now our nights are still in the low 50s, and we still have an average of about upper 60s, low 70s. Today's one of those days where it's going to get very hot, but then it's going to rain the rest of tomorrow, Thursday, in towards Friday. Now, down in this bucket, spinach and beans. Primarily beans. The spinach got, feasted on as it was, but some of the leaves, stems managed to survive, so they're starting to come back up again. The beans have started to grow. In here, cauliflower and broccoli. I'll tell you this. Woodchucks love cauliflower. I don't understand it. It's not my food. I'm planting that for a family member. They like it. They can eat it. I don't have anything else to do with it. But they don't waste a single second getting at the cauliflower. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right, we got kale looking a little sad. Again, I'm giving this pretty much the end of the week, this upcoming Sunday, before I decide what I'm going to do. The escarole, this same thing, it's just starting to get a few more coming back up again, so I want to see how it goes. The collard greens managed to hold on. I think it was just the timing of it between when they started to nibble on them and when I placed this steel mesh around it to block them off. They went to town though with the salad mix greens, and what's coming up now is probably just a third of what had started to grow, but it's looking a little bit better, so I'll see how this goes during the next week or so. Now this was my salad bar. Originally it had a 33-degree angle tilt with the low end being down there. Problem is again, chipmunks got in and they pretty much used it as a climbing ladder, like CrossFit, all the way up, nibbling in the different areas that they want. Now granted, it's only on top of these two pots and these old jack stands about 10 inches off the ground, but with the soil that's in here, and especially a lot of it is still moist underneath the surface, it weighs about 110 pounds, so I'm really not picking it up and hauling it anyplace. So it's just going to stay where it's at. I'm reseeding. I already put in some more collard greens, some more peas, and some more escarole in this one as well, seeing how it goes. Mung beans, as you can see, they're starting to go pretty well. The collard greens, not as much. The peas, tiny little nubs over there. The salad mix greens, they got nibbled on for a while. Alfalfa, and then the escarole, pretty much nothing. This row here was actually supposed to be marigolds, which they say marigolds are a good scent deterrent for a lot of these creatures. I just find it funny that that's the first plant that gets eliminated. It's almost like they know, get rid of the defensive barriers first while they're still young, and then this way there won't be a problem, because not a single stem, shoot, nothing popped up in those, and it's supposed to be well seeded and nothing came up, so I know they're onto it. All right, over here we have tomato, which is actually doing pretty well. It got a nice boost over the last week or so, and it's been coming up steady. This was another tomato and also a sweet pepper in there, but it did not make it. It's still holding on. I'm still going to wait, but I'm already set up that I'm going to more or less redo this whole area and replant that, so that'll be behind schedule a little bit. The eggplant is kind of low. You can just see right in there, and these are beans growing around it to help keep the nitrogen levels up within the soil. The hot peppers are actually doing pretty good, so I'm waiting to see which one of these is going to really start to flourish, and I will probably look to repot the others if possible. If not, I'm going to let them grow until they're a bit larger, and then I'm going to work this soil. I may even do a larger pot for the whole entire thing. Now, I can't say I'm entirely disappointed in the growth. As I said before, I do have high expectations that this will be a better growing season for me than previous years, and for what's growing right now and it's doing well, I'm quite pleased with that. The weather has actually been cooperating, and even with the assaults from the animals, it's still working out quite well. I got some sugar daddy peas there. Over here, they're starting to climb up, trellis up. This one isn't doing as well, and this one's looking a little sad. It's also, but these are all things that you have to kind of take into account when you're gardening, whether you're doing it direct in ground, raised beds, you're doing box beds, elevated containers, pots, whatever the case may be. If you're doing most of it outside, if you're doing it in a greenhouse in your front porch, you're going to have to make adjustments and adapt to certain situations depending upon what it is. Some things you can control and you can regulate and you can monitor, and you don't have too much of a problem. Other things are going to be more organic, more fluid. They're going to change up one day to the next day, and you kind of just sort of got to keep that in your mind of what could go on next. Not necessarily what could go wrong, but just sort of keep things in mind, because after all, you're working within a certain rhythm, a certain cycle, and sometimes, you know, you miss that beat just once and it can throw everything off. Other times you'll find that it sort of falls into its own synchronicity and things move along in a natural way that they're supposed to. A couple of small things I wanted to show you, a little bonus growing ideas that I was just working on. All right, in here I had stevia plants, or I should say the seeds. So far nothing. I may have to try again on this one. I've got a Thai chili pepper that hopefully, if you can see it right there, that little guy right there. These are just mung beans. Again, I try to balance out companion planting so that way there's a benefit and some general protection for the primary crop that I'm growing. And then of course the dwarf citrus plant, same thing. In here right now, hopefully it'll be getting bigger. Now, these, if you look at them, you think, oh, those look kind of familiar. Potatoes, all the way down. Basically, I took probably a half of what the bag of potatoes I had that were in the basket. They were smaller. They all had, you know, some shoots starting to come up, but they looked like they were right on the line of maybe not making it. So I figure, what's the harm? I'll plant them in there just to see how they do. Worst comes to worst, they die, they rot, they add to the compost of the soil. If something does come up, well, then that's something that works out, and I'll see what happens afterwards. Now, one of the last things that I'm doing, and it has worked out very well, to mitigate the woodchucks getting in and basically putting their attention on what's growing in the garden, I did do some wild planting on the slope and areas around it, but a lot of that, the weeds that were there overtook a lot of it, so they probably got blocked out for sunlight and had to compete too quickly for nutrients from the weeds when they were still young. But that's not really a loss on my end, so I'm looking at what I did do out here in the yard. Clover. It's actually red and white clover, but mostly the white is what you see coming up. They love this because I've seen them at different times on my security camera when they've tripped the motion sensor, and a few times in the morning when I've come out, they are just nibbling away at this like it's an open salad bar. And I know a lot of people, when they see clover in their lawns, they want to get rid of it. I don't care. As long as my lawn isn't brown, I don't care whether it's tall grass, short grass, bluegrass, ryegrass, or clover. Green is what it should be. That's my primary concern. And if I can use the clover to keep them away from the garden, that's perfectly fine, because for what I pay for the clover, literally less than 1/10 of a cent on the dime to the dollar. It was so inexpensive, and it grows pretty quick. I mean, from seed to shoot was just about 2 weeks before they started having stems and small leaves popping up. And by the end of the month, I had full coverage. And of course, the clover self-seeds, so it begins to spread. So even if you do a small area, it will, over a very quick period of time, unless you mow it down to the dirt, start to spread and grow. And of course, these guys, you know, all the birds, they come in looking for whatever seed scraps they can find, anything that turns up when I do yard work. I do have a bird bath there to keep them hydrated, you know, because I'm a humanitarian. That's the kind of person I am. So that is the survival garden as it is right now for 2024. Things are still moving along, things are still evolving and changing, and it's just a matter of keeping up on it and going with the flow to the best extent that you can. All right, that's it for now. I'll catch you in the next one.